Welcome to the Crossing Church. This is the version of the crossing that goes where you go and delivers what you need. Fresh perspectives on faith and Jesus with practical, real-life next steps built in. This is your place to explore faith and experience the life-changing ways of Jesus.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our online experience. Thank you so much for joining with us on YouTube or maybe on the podcast. If this is your first time checking us out, or maybe the 100th time, this time is designed just for you. My name is Andrew, and I get the privilege of being the lead pastor here at the Crossing Church in Costa Mesa. Now, years ago, a pastor by the name of John Ortberg in the Bay Area, he introduced me to a series of books where kids provide solutions for life's biggest problems. For example, one question they posed for kids to answer was this: telling people smoking is bad for them doesn't work. What would you do? Here's the answer of Alexis, age 8. Her solution: go to a smoker's house, pretend to smoke, and then die. That'll get them to stop. Another problem: too many people spend hours at jobs they don't like. How would you solve this? Andrew, age 9. Pay them double, and then have a big tickling machine to tickle people who are unhappy. One more. With billions of people in the world, someone should be able to figure out a system where no one is lonely. What do you suggest? One kid, Max, age 9, suggested make food that talks to you when you eat. It could ask you questions like, how are you doing today? But here's my favorite, Brian, age 8. Sing a song, stomp your feet, read a book. Sometimes I think no one loves me, so I do one of these. With billions of people in the world, someone should be able to figure out a system where no one is lonely. Recently, the healthcare provider Cigna paid for a massive study on loneliness and isolation. Here's what it found. 57% of men and 59% of women report having feelings of loneliness and isolation. This one surprised me. It found that 79% of adults age 18 to 24 report feeling lonely compared to just 41% of seniors. Parents, 65% of parents regularly experience feelings of loneliness compared to 55% of non-parents. Get this one, 77% of single parents identify as struggling with loneliness. One more stat that's just stuck with me. 36% of all Americans struggle with what they refer to as serious loneliness. With billions of people in the world, someone should be able to figure out a system where no one is lonely. See, today we are in a series called Cancel, where we are looking at the things in our lives that God wants to get rid of, the things deep inside of us that He wants to speak to and heal. And today I want to talk about the loneliness and isolation epidemic that so many people feel. That, inside of each one of us, the reality is this: inside of each one of us, there is this longing, this hunger for community, for connection. So today, we are going to look at God's plan, God's answer for loneliness and isolation in our world. And if you got a Bible nearby, I want to encourage you to turn to Acts chapter 2. If not, you can download our app. It's totally free, and you can follow along with me, because in Acts chapter 2, we see God's answer to loneliness and to isolation. And it can be summed up in just one word. Now, however, before you get too excited, I want to let you know that when I share this word with you, it is going to be a huge letdown, because this word, it has been watered down, diluted to the point where it carries virtually little to no meaning for many of us. Are you ready for it? God's plan to cancel isolation and loneliness in our world is to help you find, now here's the word, fellowship. I know, I warned you that this word would be a huge letdown. But we find it here in Acts chapter 2, verse 42, where we find these early followers of Jesus. Here's what it says about them. It says, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. You see, here we find that they were committed to the teaching of God's word and to fellowship. Now, I don't know what you think about when you first hear that word fellowship, but I think about growing up when I was a kid. My family, we would go visit my grandma, and on the weekends, we would go to her little tiny church in her little town. And after the service, we had to go to this room called the fellowship hall, where people brought casseroles and coffee and donuts, and people made small talk for hours. And I'll tell you, as a kid, this was a nightmare. Not only did I have to get dressed up for church, which was terrible enough, not only did I have to sit through a 90-minute boring church service, but then I had to sit there and listen to grown-ups talk about things like, can you believe the weather lately? Oh my, it's been so hot. Or they would talk about the stock market, or all sorts of other superficial things that just bored me to tears. You see, I dreaded going to the fellowship hall. And maybe growing up, you had a similar experience. But you see, back in the early church, this word fellowship, it was everything. Fellowship was a word that didn't conjure up images of casseroles and small talk. It was a word that conjured up a bigger and better way of life. And my hope today is to recapture the significance of this word, fellowship. Probably the best analogy, the most recent one that I can convey this intent of this word, it comes from a movie that actually now is pretty old. It's the first Lord of the Rings movie called Fellowship of the Ring. The basic plot is a group of people come together who would never normally be together. There's a dwarf, an elf, an old wizard. There's these group of these little things called hobbits, and then there's a couple of people. Now this group, they have never met. They have nothing in common, but they are given a task to destroy a ring, a dark, powerful ring. And so this unlikely group of strangers, they set out. And you watch as over 3 movies, which are each like 5 hours each, you watch as this group of strangers over time, they become friends. And you watch as they begin to care for each other, protect each other, fight for each other. Some even lay down their lives for each other. And somewhere along the journey, this bond is formed. This random group of people, they become like family. They laugh and cry. They serve and sacrifice. They do life together. That's a fellowship. That is what the human heart longs for. A fellowship is formed. That's why the movie is called The Fellowship of the Ring. Now, the author of these books that the movies were based on, he himself was a Jesus follower, and he understood the power of a real community, a real fellowship. He understood that we go through life and we long for others to do life with. And maybe you've had glimpses of these types of relationships in your life. Maybe at age 18, you met some college roommates, and together, you navigated that great adventure of college together, living away from home, classes, relationships, breakups. Maybe you look back on that group of friends and you think how close you were for a season. Or maybe years ago, you were in a small group, and during that period of time, something happened to you, a job loss, a diagnosis of cancer, an unexpected divorce. And this group of people, they rallied around you. They encouraged you. They prayed for you. You didn't even have to ask, but they just showed up with meals and support right when you needed it. You see, my experience as a pastor is that many of us, we could look back in our lives and we could see these brief moments where we had a person or a group of people who we were in fellowship with, a close-knit community for us. But again, my experience is that for many of this was a long time ago. And for many of us, that the things that they bond us together now are so much more of a surface level thing. Things like, are you a Rams fan or Chargers fan? Dodgers or Angels? Marvel or DC? You see, and those relationships that are formed, they're nice, but they're not what we need. So today, in our remaining time together, we're going to look at 3 characteristics that are life-giving, faith-filled communities that they all have in common. These characteristics of a fellowship. And all 3 of them are found in Acts chapter 2. The first one we see is in Acts 2, verse 44. It says, all the believers were together and had everything in common. Now we know that this early church had at least 3,000 people. So let's pause here for a second. Can you imagine 3,000 people having everything in common? I mean, have you ever tried to get a group of people to agree on anything. I have a family of just 4 people. And most of the time, we can't even agree on the smallest things. Like every once in a while, I'll make the parenting mistake of I'll just say in front of everyone, I'll be like, hey guys, where do you want to go for dinner tonight? And instantly everyone is shouting out something different. One child says McDonald's, another wants sushi, my wife will want Mexican. And we all know the right answer to this question is In-N-Out, but it takes forever for my family to make a decision about just dinner. And here we find in this passage that there are at least 3,000 people and they have everything in common. How can that possibly be? I'll tell you. It's because they chose to rally around one mission. You see, occasionally you and I, we will find ourselves in a place where a large group of people have gathered together with one single mission. Maybe it's a concert or a football game. But for me, I experienced this last year. Last year, Nicole, one of our teaching pastors, and her husband, they talked me into doing something called a Spartan race with them. If you don't know what a Spartan race is, it's just a race where you not only run a long distance, but you have to do these brutal obstacles. They had done a bunch of these before, but I had never done anything like this. So I trained a very little for this, and I showed up on race day. And to my amazement, I saw that this place was packed. And it was packed with all sorts of different people. There were men, women, young, old, people from every background. And as the race started, what surprised me most was that everyone was in it together. As you approached obstacles, people would cheer you on. They'd encourage you. They'd offer you advice on how to get around or over an obstacle. They'd high five you when you completed one. They'd pat you on the shoulder when you failed one. Here we were, complete strangers. There might have been thousands of things we disagreed about, but we were together and we had rallied under one mission. And I'll tell you, when the church gathers together, whether it be online or in person, we gather around under one mission. What's our mission? I'm so glad you asked. We know it today as the Great Commission. It's found in Matthew 28, verse 19. Jesus says to his followers, therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. Jesus said, go, make disciples. Live your lives in such a way that you point people through your words and actions towards his love and his grace. Teach them, Jesus says, all that I have taught you. Let them know that life is better with God at the center. You see, these early followers, they had a mission, and that is our mission today. Around here, we say it like this. Our mission is to be the place people go to explore faith and experience the life-changing ways of Jesus. Same mission, different words. Our mission is not to gather a crowd. Our mission is not to create a nice place for families to go on the weekend or for you to feel encouraged online after watching a service. Those are all good things, but our mission is to go out into the world with the message of Jesus. You see, we rally around it. We create online content so that when someone moves to the area or someone gets invited to our church, they can watch us online before they ever show up on our campus. We create online content so that when you're sick or on vacation, when you can't be here in person or you choose not to be here in person, you can still learn and experience and grow. You can experience the life-changing ways of Jesus. You see, as a church, we disproportionately invest in our kids and students because we want this next generation to grow up and know they matter to our God, that they are loved, that they are valuable. You see, this is why we create places and talk about things like Alpha, where people who aren't even sure if God exists or have lots of faith questions can show up on a Wednesday night on our campus and ask any question and feel safe and welcome. We have a team that gathers in a prayer room on Saturday mornings and prays for this church and prays that God would work and that people would continue to experience the life-changing ways of Jesus around here. You see, we rally around one mission, but it doesn't stop there. Acts chapter 2, verse 44 again, it says, all the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Not only did they rally around one mission, they sacrificed regularly. You see, great communities are built by great sacrifice. A lot of time when we think about sacrifice, we think about financial sacrifice. And we do. We see that in the passage. People sold property and they gave to those in need. This is an indispensable part of community and fellowship. Even around here, we talk about giving every week in our service because as a church, we work with people and organizations in our community and around the globe that have great need. But sacrifice is more than just giving of some of your resources. 6 years ago, I was getting ready, my family and I, we were getting ready to move from Chicago to Southern California. And my wife and I, we were trying to figure out a plan on how to get all of our stuff from Chicago to here and our 2 young kids as well. So we came up with this plan. And as we were coming up with this plan, I had 2 friends come to me and they offered to drive across the country with me with all of my stuff. Now you got to understand, this was a 3-day trip where we would drive like 18 hours a day. We would stop only to eat fast food. And then when we arrived here, they were going to help me unpack and immediately then fly back home and go to work the very next day. And here was the most amazing thing. These 2 friends, they offered this gift of driving with me. I didn't have to beg or guilt trip them. They just, of their own volition, came to me and said, do you want us to drive with you and help you get your stuff to Southern California? They sacrificed greatly for me. And then when I arrived, Tim, our founding pastor, and his wife Sue, they were on our front door to help my family unpack. I can still remember Sue walking up and down the street with our youngest in a stroller so that he could fall asleep, so my wife and I could start figuring out where things were going to go in our new home and we could unpack. You see, Tim and Sue, they sacrificed an entire day to be with us. I'll never forget the people who sacrificed for us. It sticks with us. And I bet those moments stick with you as well. See, when you are part of a great community, when someone sacrifices, you see, a fellowship is formed. And sometimes it's in very small ways. Verse 46, we see this. It says, every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. Now, question for you. Do you think they ever felt like staying home and just vegging out on the couch? Of course they did. But you see, they made it a practice to meet regularly because great community requires sacrifice. And I'll tell you, I've seen this in my own life. Some of the best experiences I've ever had in small groups over the years have been where I've just had the busiest day, where I'm rushing through work and I got to pick up the kids and bring them to baseball practice. And then all throughout the day, I got this little voice in my head that just says, Andrew, you're too busy today. You should just skip your small group tonight. You need it night at home. But I'll tell you, I've learned over the years that when I show up on those moments and on those nights, it's in those times where I'm tired, where I've been thinking about all day about how I could ditch that. Often it's right then that God does his best work. Those are the nights where someone will open up about their marriage or about a struggle in their personal life or about a doubt they have about God. You see, those are the nights where we just have the best conversations and you feel God moving. You see, I've taught myself it's in the moments of sacrifice, both with my time and resources, that often the deepest relationships are formed. You see, fellowship is when we rally under one mission, when we sacrifice regularly, and finally, when we fight fakeness. Now, I don't know if you know this, but sometimes church people can be the most fake. I mean, you could show up on our campus after a terrible week at work and you drive in and on the way you get in this big fight with your spouse and you yell at your kids to hurry up and for once in their life behave. But then the moment you step out of the car, what do? You put a big fake smile on your face. And when someone says, "How was your week?" you're like, "Amazing. God is so good." Now, of course, it's not just church people who can be guilty of being fake. We can all do this. We can all spend our time trying to create a perfect Instagram life while our real life is falling apart. You see, you and I, we live in a world that says you have to have everything figured out. You have to have the perfect life. But what you and I desperately need is a place to fight against the fakeness that is just so common in our world today. Verse 46 says this. It says, they broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. What we see in this passage is there's this phrase, it says sincere hearts. And what it communicates is this idea of humility and simplicity. It communicates a come as you are mentality. A place where no one has to pretend to be better than they are or smarter or more successful than they are. And this passage, it actually gives us a clue about how to create that type of environment. It says they broke bread in their homes. Their strategy was just eat together. There's just something they understood that's so powerful about sharing a meal together. When you share a meal with someone, all the pretending, all the fakeness, it all just goes out the window, doesn't it? Let me give you an example of this. Out in the world, I may or may not, but I may be able to convince you that I got everything in my life together. That I am the perfect spiritual leader, that I'm the perfect husband and perfect dad. But if you were to come over to my house, if we were to share a meal there together, you would see I'm not so perfect. You would get a window into my real world. When you walked in my front door, you would probably step on a Lego or Cheerio, which would let you know I got kids that run all over the place. If you were to come over for dinner last week, where it was like 1,000 degrees inside my house because we don't have central air, you would have gotten to hear me complain over and over and over again about just how hot it was. If you had enough dinners at my house, you'd see that I'm probably a pretty good husband and a pretty good dad, but I am far from perfect. You see, the idea here is that in real community, in a real fellowship, we fight being fake. You see, in life, when we most need people, when we're going through the hardest moments, that's when we're most tempted to be fake, to pretend that everything is okay. But when you really know someone, when you share a meal, and you're sharing your life with these people, you have these just opportunities in moments of crisis or pain to just simply let someone in. See, you have this opportunity in those moments to share about how hurt or scared or maybe excited you are about something. You see, it's an authentic community where we rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with those who mourn. It's when we're able to be honest that we learn that it's okay to not have life all figured out. It's okay to have made some mistakes. You see, we fight that pervasive fakeness that is all over in our world. Now, could you imagine a community like this? Can you imagine a place where people from all sorts of life, they come together and they rally around one mission? Can you imagine a place where people, they sacrifice time and resources and they do it joyfully for those in need around them? Can you imagine a place where people fight being fake? Where you have the opportunity to be real? This is what that word fellowship means. And I'll tell you, it's what our world is starved for. And we see in Acts 2 the result of what happens when people encounter authenticity and fellowship. It says, and the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. People back then saw something different about those gatherings and those people. They saw what they longed for. With billions of people in the world, someone should be able to figure out a system where no one is lonely. And I'll tell you, and someone did. See, God designed us in such a way to long for and search for a community of fellowship like this, where you and I can rally under one mission, where we sacrifice greatly for each other, and where we fight fakeness. And so here's how I want to close our time today. I'll just tell you, if you don't have a group of people like this in your life, we are in a season as a church where we're launching brand new small groups. This is our attempt to help a big church feel a little smaller. It's a way for us each to explore faith and experience the life-changing ways of Jesus. And so I'll tell you, if you're in a season where you don't have the type of relationships I just described, I want to encourage you today, make today the day where you change that. You're going to hear more about some of those opportunities in just a minute, but I want to encourage you today, you can cancel isolation and loneliness. Let's pray. God, we thank you for today. And we thank you for how you've designed us to long for something more than just superficial friendships. And so, God, I pray you give each one of us the courage to take a step today and to experience the life-changing ways that you have for us. We love you and pray this in your Son's name. Amen.
You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. And great are you, Lord, 'cause it's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Sing, great are you, Lord. You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Sing, great are you, Lord, 'cause it's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. And all the earth will shout your praise, our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. And great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise, our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. And great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise, our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. And great are you, Lord. See, it's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath
Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Omar Garcia, and I'm the Grow Pastor here at The Crossing. And I'd love to offer you a couple of next steps to help you keep exploring faith. We've created a resource just for you. And wherever you find yourself in your spiritual journey, this is like a spiritual personality test to help you find your unique path to God. It's our free gift to you. Just use the QR code or the link in the description. And if you want to grow in your spiritual and mental health, it helps to have people alongside you moving in the same direction. And this is why we have small groups at The Crossing, where we meet once a week with a few people to really help each other grow. Alpha is great for exploring faith. How We Love is great for relational and mental health. And then our weekend groups are for deeper study of our weekend message. And so if you're interested in jumping into any one of those tracks, please feel free to email me at groups@thecrossing.com with any questions. Groups are one of the most important steps that you can take here at The Crossing. And then for those of you who give to The Crossing, we just want to say thank you so much for the huge impact that you're making in people's lives. Just yesterday, I was sitting down with a gal who's gone through Alpha, and her life was completely changed because she went through that and because she was a part of a small group. And so thank you for your donations and the way that you've created an environment for people to explore faith and experience the life-changing ways of Jesus. Now, if you're interested in giving here at The Crossing, all you have to do is go to thecrossing.com/give, and you can give a one-time gift or set up regular automatic giving and make a difference every month. Thank you so much for joining us today, and download the Pathways to God resource and let us know if it helps you. We can't wait to see what God does in your life too. And so we'll see you online all the time and on Sundays at 9:15 and 11:15 a.m. Have a good one.